Her heart stopped beating, not for a minute, not for an hour. It ceased for 3 days while she lay in the ICU, her chest motionless, the monitors registering absolute zero. And then, at 3:17 a.m., on the 4th day, a single, weak pulse registered on the machine. The attending nurse smelled it first. A sudden, cloying sweetness in the air, like overripe fruit left to rot in a sealed jar. The patient's eyes snapped open, but they didn't scan the room in confusion. They fixed, unblinking, on a dark corner where nothing stood. Her lips parted, and a sound emerged. Not a groan or a word, but a dry, papery whisper. The sound of dead leaves scraping across concrete. She spoke a name no one in the hospital recognized. A name that, when checked later, belonged to a man who had died in that very building 47 years prior. This is not a story of a medical miracle. It is the record of what followed her back from that 3-day silence. For 10 days, she was medically dead, but her consciousness had retreated to some primal, unknowable place. When the defibrillator jolted her back, the air in the room thickened with the scent of ozone and something faintly putrid. She returned to us, but she didn't come back alone. A warning. This is the story of Sarah Miller, the woman who ventured where no living soul had gone, and what she witnessed waiting for us on the other side. Sarah's story begins on a sunny suburban street, a place of manicured lawns and quiet afternoons. Yet, beneath that placid surface, a subtle wrongness lingered. A faint, metallic scent on the breeze, a chill that the sun couldn't touch. It was here, in the heart of the ordinary, that the first whispers of the impossible began. Sarah Miller lived the life we all imagined. A devoted husband, 2 radiant children, and a teaching career that fulfilled her. She was the anchor of her family, practical, nurturing, the planner of celebrations, and the calm in any crisis. The only peculiarity in her otherwise ordinary world was her occasional, intensely vivid déjà vu. These fleeting moments felt less like memory and more like an unsettling echo from somewhere else. She'd dismiss it with a smile, telling John it was just her brain misfiring. At the community center, Sarah was organizing a charity 5K for the local hospital. The air grew heavy with the scent of old paper and stale coffee. Then, amidst the mundane preparations, the unthinkable began to unfold. Sarah had just finished stacking the race t-shirts when a heavy thud echoed through the room. The steady beep of the heart monitor transformed into a single, piercing, sustained tone. The air in the St. Vincent's Hospital ER grew thick with the scent of ozone and sterile alcohol. Every movement ceased as that unbroken tone seemed to swallow all other sound in the ward. The emergency room erupted into controlled chaos as doctors began frantic CPR. John arrived, his face drained of all color, the sterile air thick with ozone and iron. For the team at St. Vincent's, this wasn't just another emergency. It was a massive, sudden cardiac arrest. The cold, damp chill of the room seemed to seep into their bones as they worked. A widowmaker. They fought for her. They shocked her, pumped her chest, injected every drug they had. But Sarah's heart was a stone. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. The protocol for declaring death had long since been met. But Drive, Aris Thorne, a man defined by stubbornness and his peculiar faith in the brain's endurance, stared at the flicker on the specialized EEG monitor. It wasn't a rhythm, not a known pattern of life. It was a deep, slow pulse of consciousness, a willful spark, flaring in the absolute void where there should be none. The sterile air in the room seemed to thicken, carrying the faint metallic scent of ozone and a deeper, more unsettling smell of damp, cold stone. It wasn't a heartbeat, it was a thought wave. Her body was gone, but her mind persisted somewhere in the void. We had to try. They placed her on an ECMO machine, a labyrinth of tubes, and a mechanical pump doing the work of her heart and lungs. A last-ditch technological miracle that filled the air with the sterile scent of ozone and the rhythmic hum of artificial life. It bypassed her heart and lungs, oxygenating her blood externally. Her body was, for all intents and purposes, a vacant house being kept tidy by a machine. For 10 days, she was medically deceased. And for 10 days, as her body lay in the ICU, cold and still, Sarah Miller was on a journey. The moment of death wasn't what Sarah expected. No tunnel of light, no celestial gates or comforting clouds awaited her. Instead, she found herself in a place of profound, unsettling neutrality, a silent, gray expanse where nothing moved and nothing called out. Inside, she discovered she wasn't alone. Sarah. There were others. The air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth and old rock. Not people, not anymore. They drifted like emotional echoes. A dense cluster of pure regret in one corner, a pulsing knot of raw anger nearby, and a faint, fading chime of joy. They weren't in pain. They were just stuck, waiting for something to dissolve. She floated among these emotional afterimages, the air thick with the scent of ozone and decay. Then she felt a pull, a sudden, inexorable tug that tightened her chest and stole her breath. The sensation wasn't painful, but it was undeniable, like gravity reasserting its claim. A desperate, specific tug, sharper, brighter than the echoes before. It was terror, and it felt familiar. The gray mist parted, revealing a faint, shimmering thread. A tether of pure love and shared grief connecting Sarah to a distant, familiar panic. She recognized the raw emotion flowing through it, John's anguish. It was a lifeline in the void, anchoring her wandering spirit. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and sorrow. Every pulse along that cord was a whisper of his name. It was not a chain, but a desperate, loving anchor, pulling her back from the precipice of the unknown. I tried to follow it back, to scream, to tell him I was here, but I had no mouth, no voice. Just a point of awareness. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone and decay, thick enough to feel on my non-existent skin. Then, the pull of John's love did something else. It wasn't a sound, but a vibration that resonated in the core of my being. A primal dread took hold as the vibration deepened, sticky and cold, like sinking into a forgotten grave. It drew the attention of the other echoes, and they began to converge. A low, collective hum rose, like many voices whispering just below comprehension. Sarah's voice trembled with fearful realization. They weren't malicious. They were hungry. They didn't want my flesh, but the texture of what I held, the tether, the connection to a living, beating heart. They pressed closer, not to harm me, but to feel that vital thread coursing through my body. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and a faint, coppery tang. A primal dread took hold as I realized I was just a conduit for something they desperately needed to touch, to remember what it was like, and I felt myself starting to thin out, to become like them, a forgotten feeling. Back in the ICU on the 10th day, against all odds and all medical logic, Dr. Thorne watched as Sarah's EKG displayed a faint, erratic flutter. A phantom heartbeat struggling to ignite. The impossible had manifested on the monitor. A metallic scent of ozone filled the air as he prepared the defibrillator paddles. His own pulse hammered in his ears, drowning out the room's hum. With a final surge of desperate hope, he administered the shock. The room erupted in a blinding, sterile, white flash. The aftermath was a void of light and sound, leaving only the acrid smell of burnt electricity hanging in the sudden stillness. The defibrillator discharged with a sharp crack, jolting Sarah's body upward on the bed. The flatline on the monitor stuttered. Then a faint, irregular beep began to pulse through the heavy silence. Weeks later, Sarah sat wrapped in a blanket on her sofa, her frame frail and diminished. Her gaze was fixed on the window, distant and hollow, as if seeing something far beyond the glass. John watched her return, his joy tempered by a deep, unsettling concern. The news called her the miracle from Columbus, a medical marvel, but the woman who came back carried the faint scent of ozone and damp earth. The practical teacher who left was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar. She was withdrawn, spectral, flinching at any sudden sound. Her body had betrayed her with a new, chilling symptom. She could no longer feel the pulse of her own heart. A damp, metallic scent clung to the air around her, cold and invasive. Then, in a whisper barely louder than a breath, she confessed, "I can feel yours if I'm close to you. I can feel other children's hearts, like frantic hummingbirds beating against my palm. But inside my own chest, there's only a hollow, dead silence. The doctors call it a neurological glitch, nerve damage from the arrest. But I know the truth. Something was taken that night, and the void it left is cold and absolute." She told John and Dr. Thorne about the Gray Place, a realm of endless echoes. "I left my heartbeat over there," she whispered, her voice brittle with memory. The air in the room grew dense and cold, carrying a faint, metallic scent like old coin. "It's what I used to pay my way back," she concluded, the finality in her tone making the silence feel thick and suffocating. Sarah's theory wasn't about heaven or hell, but a waiting room, where human consciousness lingers to slowly fade after death, unless something powerful and immediate pulls it back. What terrified Sarah most wasn't the emptiness of that place, but its terrible attraction. The dead are drawn to the living, with a hunger that transcends the grave. In that silent room, holding John's hand to her own still chest, she felt the pull begin, a cold, insistent tugging at the edges of her being. It's not to harm us, but because we're the only light they can perceive in that endless gray. Our love, our grief, our rage, they act as beacons in the void. The stronger your bond, the brighter you burn to them in the consuming darkness. So love each other fiercely, because that love is the only anchor that might pull you back if you slip away. And it's the only shield that might insulate you from what's already there, waiting in the silence. What if death isn't an end, but a slow forgetting? And what if the only thing that can save you from fading away forever is someone on this side, refusing to let go? The heart monitor's rhythmic beep stutters, then distorts, its cadence warping into a single, elongated tone. The sound stretches thin, a fragile wire of life fraying into a low, resonant hum. Then, it collapses into a final, unwavering flatline, a sonic void where a pulse should be. The screen fades to black, leaving only the memory of that hollow, terminal note hanging in the air.